The crack of a gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Sweetwater Creek, Texas, 1875, as Madeline Sullivan stood frozen on her porch, watching her husband Thomas ride away with the town's newest resident, a woman with copper hair whose laughter had been haunting Madeline's dreams for weeks. The betrayal stung sharper than the hot summer air against her tear-streaked face, but nothing could have prepared her for the comfort she would find in the most unexpected place. The steady blue eyes of the taciturn cowboy who had been working her husband's ranch these past 6 months. Madeline clutched the porch railing as Thomas disappeared into the horizon with that woman, her knuckles turning white with tension. 6 years of marriage, reduced to dust faster than a tumbleweed in a windstorm. She'd given him everything, left her family in Missouri, followed him to this unforgiving land, worked alongside him to build their modest cattle ranch. And for what? To be cast aside like yesterday's coffee grounds. Mrs. Sullivan? The deep voice behind her made her jump. She turned to find Jake Kincaid standing there, hat in hand, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his stubbled jaw. I saw what happened. Reckon you could use some help with the evening chores. Madeline quickly wiped her tears, embarrassment flushing her cheeks. At 26, she was still young enough to believe in pride, and being caught crying by one of the ranch hands mortified her. That's kind of you, Mr. Kincaid, but I'm perfectly capable. Jake nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. Never doubted that, madam. But even the strongest need a helping hand sometimes. Those simple words broke something in her, and fresh tears welled in her eyes. Without another word, Jake moved past her to the water pump, rolling up his sleeves to begin the evening chores. Madeline watched him work, noticing for the first time the careful precision of his movements, the quiet competence that had made Thomas hire him despite his mysterious past. That night, Madeline lay awake in her bed, the emptiness beside her a painful reminder of Thomas's betrayal. The ranch had never felt so quiet, so hollow. The next morning, she rose before dawn, determined to prove to herself more than anyone that she could manage without Thomas. She found Jake already in the barn, feeding the horses. You're up early, Mr. Kincaid. These animals don't feed themselves, Mrs. Sullivan, he replied simply, not looking up from his work. I suppose you'll be moving on now, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. With Thomas gone, I can't afford to keep paying you. Jake paused then, finally meeting her gaze. With all due respect, madam, I reckon you need help more than ever. I'll work for room and board until you decide what you want to do with this place. Madeline was taken aback by his offer. That's generous, but it ain't charity, he interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. It's just doing what's right. Over the next few weeks, Madeline discovered a strength within herself she hadn't known existed. With Jake's help, she kept the ranch running, rounding up cattle that had strayed, fixing fences damaged in the recent storm, negotiating with the buyers from Fort Worth who had previously only dealt with Thomas. It was during these long days of work that she began to notice things about Jake Kincaid, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he allowed himself a rare smile, how he always made sure her coffee cup was full before serving himself, the gentle way he spoke to the horses when he thought no one was listening. One evening, as they sat on the porch after a particularly hard day's work, Madeline finally asked the question that had been on her mind. Where did you come from, Mr. Kincaid? Before you came to work for us, I mean. Jake was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke, his eyes fixed on the darkening horizon. I rode with Quantrill's raiders during the war. Did things I ain't proud of. His voice grew quiet. After the war, I drifted. Tried to outrun my conscience, I suppose. Worked ranches from Kansas to New Mexico. What brought you to Sweetwater Creek? He turned to her then, his eyes searching her face. Heard Thomas Sullivan was hiring. Thought maybe this time I could stay put for a while. He paused. Never expected to find something worth staying for. The air between them seemed to thicken, and Madeline looked away, her heart pounding unexpectedly. This wasn't right. Thomas had only been gone a month. Even if he had betrayed her, she was still his wife in the eyes of God and the law. The next day brought news that changed everything. Sheriff Miller rode out to the ranch, his expression grave. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm afraid I have bad news. Your husband and Miss Lawson were ambushed by bandits near the Red River. Thomas didn't make it. The words hit Madeline like a physical blow. She sank into a chair, Jake's steady hand on her shoulder, the only thing keeping her anchored to reality. Despite everything Thomas had done, she had never wished him dead. The woman, Jake asked, his voice taut, survived. She's recuperating at Doc Wilson's in town, the sheriff replied. Said the bandits took everything they had. Your husband died trying to protect her. After the sheriff left, Madeline sat in stunned silence. Jake knelt before her, his eyes filled with concern. What can I do? He asked simply. Stay, she whispered, surprising herself with the request. Please, just stay. The funeral was a small affair. Few in town had known Thomas well, and those who did seemed uncertain how to treat his widow, given the circumstances of his departure. Jake stood beside Madeline throughout, a silent pillar of strength. As the weeks passed, grief and relief waged a confusing war within Madeline's heart. She mourned the man Thomas had been when they first married, kind, ambitious, full of dreams for their future. But she couldn't deny the freedom she felt, released from a marriage that had grown increasingly cold over the years. Spring arrived, bringing new life to the ranch. The cattle gave birth to healthy calves. The vegetable garden Madeline had planted began to flourish, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the hollow feeling in her chest began to fill with something new, something that quickened her pulse whenever Jake Kincaid entered a room. One afternoon, as they worked side by side mending a broken corral fence, their hands brushed. The simple contact sent a jolt through Madeline that had nothing to do with the summer heat. I'm sorry, Jake said, pulling back quickly. Don't be, she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the rest of the world faded away. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. They turned to see a rider approaching, a woman with copper hair. Madeline's stomach twisted as she recognized Vivian Lawson, the woman who had left with Thomas that fateful day. Vivian dismounted, her fine dress dusty from the ride. Mrs. Sullivan, she said, her voice wavering slightly. I needed to see you. To explain. Jake moved protectively closer to Madeline. This isn't a good time, Miss Lawson. Please, Vivian insisted, her eyes red-rimmed. I owe her the truth. Inside the house, Vivian sat rigidly at Madeline's kitchen table, twisting a handkerchief between her gloved fingers. Thomas lied to me, she began. He told me you were cruel to him, that you had taken a lover, that your marriage was over in all but name. Madeline felt as if she'd been slapped. That's absurd. I was faithful to him every day of our marriage. I know that now, Vivian said miserably. After what happened, I went through his things. I found letters, many letters, from women in different towns. This wasn't the first time, Mrs. Sullivan. I was just the latest fool to believe his stories. Madeline sat in stunned silence as Vivian continued, explaining how Thomas had charmed her with promises of marriage once he was free, how he had planned to sell the ranch out from under Madeline and take the money west to California. He never loved me, Vivian finished, tears streaming down her face. And he didn't die protecting me. He was trying to run when the bandits shot him. I lied to protect what little dignity he had left. She reached into her reticule and pulled out a folded document. This is the deed to the ranch. He had me keep it in my trunk. It rightfully belongs to you. After Vivian left, Madeline sat alone at the table, the deed before her, feeling as though the ground beneath her feet had shifted once again. Thomas had been planning to abandon her completely, to leave her with nothing. The realization should have devastated her, but instead, she felt only a strange sense of clarity. She found Jake in the barn, brushing down his horse. She's gone, Madeline said simply. You all right? He asked, setting down the brush and turning to face her. I don't know what I am, she admitted. Angry, relieved, confused. Jake took a step toward her. Madeline, he said, using her given name for the first time. I've been thinking about moving on. Her heart stuttered painfully in her chest. Why? Because every day it gets harder to be near you and remember my place, he said, his voice low and intense. I respect you too much to stay here watching you, wanting you, when you're still grieving your husband. My husband lied to me, she said, moving closer to him. He betrayed me in every way a man can betray a woman. But you, she reached up, her hand hovering uncertainly near his face. You've been nothing but honest and good. Jake caught her hand in his, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. I ain't a good man, Madeline. I've done things, we've all done things, she interrupted. It's who we choose to be now that matters. His other hand came up to cup her face gently, as if she were made of porcelain. If I stay, he said, his voice rough with emotion, I can't promise to keep my distance anymore. I don't want your distance, she whispered. I want you. Their first kiss was tentative, a question asked and answered in the space of a heartbeat. The second was bolder, a promise exchanged in the dusty half-light of the barn. Jake pulled back, his breath coming quick. People will talk. It's too soon after Thomas. Madeline shook her head. Let them talk. They don't know what our marriage was really like. They don't know what I've endured. That night, they sat on the porch watching the stars appear one by one in the vast Texas sky. Jake took her hand in his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I've been saving, he said. Not much, but enough to make some improvements to the ranch. If you'll have me. Madeline turned to him, her heart fuller than she could ever remember it being. Jake Kincaid, are you proposing a business arrangement or something more? A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his normally serious features. I'm proposing whatever you'll accept, Mrs. Sullivan. But I hope it's something more. I need time, she said honestly. Not because I don't care for you, but because I need to know my own heart better before I give it away again. Jake nodded, understanding in his eyes. I've waited my whole life to find someone worth staying for. I reckon I can wait a bit longer. The following months brought changes to Sweetwater Creek Ranch. With the deed securely in Madeline's name, she and Jake worked tirelessly to build the operation into something stronger than it had been under Thomas's management. They added to the herd, repaired long-neglected fences and outbuildings, and even hired 2 young cowboys to help with the increasing workload. As summer turned to fall, Madeline found herself watching Jake with increasing awareness. The way his shirt clung to his broad shoulders when dampened with sweat, the gentle strength in his hands whether branding a calf or helping her down from her horse, the rare but dazzling smile that seemed reserved only for her. One evening, as they sat by the fire after a long day's work, Jake cleared his throat nervously. I've been thinking, he began. A dangerous pastime, Madeline teased, enjoying the way his eyes crinkled in response. Reckon so, he agreed with a half-smile. But I've been thinking that people in town are starting to talk about us living here together, unmarried. Madeline set down her knitting. Since when do you care what people say, Jake Kincaid? Since it affects your reputation, he said seriously. I don't give a damn what they say about me, but you deserve better. And what do you suggest? That you move into the bunkhouse with the hired hands? Jake shook his head. No. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn velvet box. I'm suggesting this. Madeline's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small pearl set into it. It was my mother's, Jake explained. Only thing of hers I have left. Jake, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. I love you, Madeline Sullivan, he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. I've loved you since that first day I saw you crying on your porch and wished I could take away your pain. I know it hasn't been that long since Thomas, and maybe it's too soon to ask, but, yes, she interrupted, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Yes, I'll marry you, Jake Kincaid. His face broke into that rare, wonderful smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. I'll lie only with you, forever, he promised, his voice rough with emotion. I'll be faithful and true in ways he never was. They were married 2 weeks later by the circuit preacher. A simple ceremony with only a handful of witnesses, the ranch hands, Sheriff Miller and his wife, and surprisingly, Vivian Lawson, who had written to Madeline asking permission to attend. I'd like to see something good come from all this pain, she had written, and Madeline found she couldn't refuse. As Jake slipped the ring onto her finger for the second time, he repeated the vow he had made the night of his proposal. I'll lie only with you, forever, Madeline Kincaid. Their wedding night was a revelation. Jake's hands, so capable in the fields and with the livestock, proved equally skilled at drawing gasps and sighs from Madeline's lips. For the first time, she understood what it meant to truly be desired, to be worshipped, to be loved completely. I never knew it could be like this, she whispered afterward, curled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Jake's arms tightened around her. Neither did I, he admitted. I've known women before, but never like this. Never with love. The winter months brought challenges of blizzard that threatened the herd, illness among some of the younger calves, a dispute with a neighboring rancher over water rights, but through it all, Jake and Madeline faced each problem together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. Spring arrived again, bringing with it unexpected news. "I'm with child," Madeline told Jake one morning as they watched the sunrise from their porch. His face transformed with wonder and joy as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered, awe in his voice. "Our baby." The months that followed were filled with preparations. Jake insisted on building a proper cradle, working on it in the evenings by lamplight, his big hands surprisingly delicate as they shaped the wood. Madeline sewed tiny garments, her heart swelling with each small shirt and gown she completed. When her time came, Jake rode faster than he'd ever ridden to fetch the midwife from town. He paced anxiously outside their bedroom door for hours, flinching at each of Madeline's cries. Finally, as dawn broke over the ranch, a new cry joined the morning chorus, the healthy wail of Jacob Thomas Kincaid, named for his father and, in a gesture of forgiveness and closure, for the man whose departure had unwittingly brought his parents together. "He's perfect," Jake whispered, holding his son for the first time, tears unashamedly tracking down his weathered cheeks. Madeline watched them together, her heart so full of love it felt impossible to contain. "I never thought I could be this happy," she admitted. "After Thomas left, I thought my life was over. But it was just beginning." Jake leaned down to kiss her, their son cradled between them. "You saved me, Madeline Kincaid. I was just a drifter with nowhere to belong until I found you." As little Jacob grew, so did the ranch. Jake's careful management and Madeline's shrewd business sense turned Sweetwater Creek into one of the most prosperous operations in the county. They added to their herd, built a new barn, and hired more hands to help with the expanding workload. Their family grew as well. 2 years after Jacob's birth, a daughter joined their family, Grace Elizabeth, with her mother's auburn hair and her father's startling blue eyes. And 2 years after that, another son, William James, completed their family. 10 years after Thomas Sullivan rode away from the ranch with another woman, leaving behind a betrayed wife and an uncertain future, Madeline stood on the same porch where she had once shed bitter tears. Now, she watched her husband teaching their eldest son to rope a fence post, their daughter's laughter ringing out as she clapped her hands in delight, their youngest boy toddling after a butterfly in the yard. Jake looked up, catching her eye across the distance, and smiled that smile that still made her heart skip a beat. He said something to Jacob, then crossed the yard to join her on the porch. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Kincaid," he said, slipping his arm around her waist. "I was thinking about how differently things might have turned out," she admitted. "If Thomas hadn't left that day." Jake was quiet for a moment, his eyes on their children. "Do you ever regret it? How things happened?" Madeline turned in his arms to face him fully. At 36, Jake Kincaid was even more handsome than the day she'd first truly seen him. The lines at the corners of his eyes spoke of laughter, not hardship, and the silver beginning to thread through his dark hair only added to his appeal. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "Thomas's betrayal broke my heart, but it also set me free. Free to find you, to build this life, to know what real love feels like." Jake's eyes darkened with emotion. "I meant what I said on our wedding day, you know. I'll lie only with you, forever. That's a promise I intend to keep till my dying day." "I know," Madeline said softly, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "And I'll hold you to it, cowboy." As the sun began to set over Sweetwater Creek Ranch, casting long shadows across the land they had built together, Jake and Madeline Kincaid stood arm in arm, watching their children play. From betrayal and heartache had come a love stronger than either could have imagined, a family forged not just in blood but in choice and commitment. And as Jake leaned down to kiss his wife in the fading light, both knew with absolute certainty that some lies like Thomas Sullivan's destroyed, but others like Jake's promise to lie only with Madeline forever had the power to heal, to build, to create something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of what came before. In the years that followed, Sweetwater Creek Ranch continued to thrive. Jacob grew into a fine young man who shared his father's way with horses and his mother's head for business. Grace became known throughout the county for her beauty and kindness, turning heads wherever she went, but always returning to the ranch she loved. William, the youngest, surprised them all by developing a passion for medicine after being mentored by the town doctor. Through it all, Jake and Madeline remained the heart of the ranch, their love deepening with each passing season, their commitment to each other never wavering. And on quiet nights, when the children were asleep and the work was done, they would sit together on the porch where their story began, holding hands beneath the vast Texas sky, grateful for the betrayal that had set them on the path to finding each other. For in the wild unpredictability of life on the frontier, they had discovered the most precious truth of all. Sometimes the greatest blessings arrive disguised as heartbreak, and the truest promises are the ones kept not out of obligation, but out of love.